Hello, and welcome to the next episode of Up Close and Personal, the FESPA podcast with me, Richard Askam, and my guest today, the Business Development Manager of Cloudprinter, Mr. Tim Cox. Good morning, Tim.
Hi, Richard. How are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you. Although I'm not learning that I say good morning. This could, of course, be played out in the evening. It could be a different time zone. It could be anywhere in the world. I've no idea.
Definitely morning. Take 2 seconds to look at the bags under my eyes. You'll know.
That's a fair point. That's a good one. I like that. So how are you doing anyway?
All good. All good. Yeah. Life is sweet.
Good. Excellent. Well, that's what we like to hear. And at the start of what we hope will be a very busy year for all of us, but more especially for FESPA with this brand new show that's being launched, the Personalisation Experience, being launched in May in Munich. And obviously our hope is to get as many people and as many views and as many opinions from around the world and around the industries involved in this conversation. This podcast really is about an individual conversation with you to get your views and obviously Cloudprinter's views of the opportunities that lie ahead. And I'm going to start, Tim, if I may, with the same question that I ask all of my guests, which is, what does personalisation mean to you?
I think it very much depends upon whether I'm coming from an industry point of view or I'm coming from a personal point of view. I think it's safe to say it's here to stay, and it's also safe to say it's been here for a long time. I think that there's a bit of hype surrounding it at the moment, which kind of, I guess, is unwarranted in most cases. But yeah, I mean, we all receive our mailings through the door. We all get our greetings cards. We've all used sites to build our business cards, and I think that even though there are still some out there in the world of procuring these tools that think this is still stuff of wizards, it really is a little bit old hat. Well, not old hat because it's still current today, but I think that there's no excitement surrounding it. I think the thing is really where the personalization for me becomes exciting, and I could give you 1,000 examples, but it's probably what I find more exciting is when you can see that the company that is overseeing the personalization has taken a campaign approach to it. So they've actually thought about what specifically it is that they want to do. They're not just sending you a mug with your name on it or a t-shirt with your name on it or a greetings card. They're actually after something from you. And I think now that the world of data has matured, and I think that now we're dealing with a much more cleansed environment, we're dealing with intelligent technologies that allow a more programmatic or triggered based campaign to take place. Things get very exciting. I think if we keep print centric, we're just part of a much bigger marketing mix, which is still something that I think some people in the print sector find difficult to get their heads around. I guess the product, we spoke before about it, and I think that the end product is a very important factor. It might be a personalized bottle, it might be some chocolate, it could be any number of products, because pretty much anything that is out there now can be personalized. It doesn't matter whether it's print related or not. I mean, if you can print a steak, and you can sequence elements of DNA, and you can start working with products that have nothing to do with print, then I think we have to appreciate that the marketers within certainly the bigger brands are going to be looking more globally at what they're dealing with. We've gone beyond the 20-30 year ago when there were only 4 channels, your radio, TV, cinema, and print, and we're now dealing with just a plethora. So a lot of it, I guess, depends very much upon demographic. And that will often drive whatever that personalized item is. But yeah, for me, I guess personalization realistically gets exciting and scary at the same time. When you've got companies collaborating on data, they can do some pretty scary things to us in terms of manipulating us. Even what we watch on TV is based upon our demographic. And a lot of people don't realize the ads are piped in based upon who's sitting in front of the TV, who's logged in. So I think personalization is a word that within print is very, very singular, but I think if you take personalization as the word is, and how marketers are now using it, which ultimately is what drives print, it's not one thing, it's just vast and exciting.
I think that's really true, actually. And you mentioned a couple of words in there, old hat, and I'm sort of wondering, and I really like your view on this, Tim, whether we've almost got stuck with what people think personalization not only is, but what it's for. and the successful campaigns of the last few years, and I've been very fortunate to be involved in several of them, Share a Coke being the most obvious. But that's 8 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I wonder, Tim, whether we've got stuck thinking that personalization is putting your name on something and that'll do. And the value that connection, the intention of that connection is lost, largely because it comes across as a novelty rather than as a meaningful, not necessarily gift. I don't want to get stuck in gifting either, because it's behaviors. So I mean, do you agree? I mean, are we at a bit of a crossroads where we could go
Completely.
on? Yeah.
I completely agree. I think the print industry in general probably doesn't help itself. I think that much of the print industry don't always understand the mechanics that go behind marketing and how things are arrived at. We're dealing very much in the print industry. Son of a printer, so I love print. So this is not a print bashing exercise. I just think that it is time now for not the clever leaders of the pack, the very applied mixed offering print areas that are companies that are kind of changed and metamorphosized into almost full service agencies. I'm talking about the print industry, the print industry. I think need to educate. I think you can spend a little bit of time playing across YouTube, finding out things, following yourself down the rabbit holes, seeing what comes out. But I think people have to understand it. Even people in marketing don't get it. Marketers, certainly the ones that are kind of anti-print, still think that everything can be delivered on an online basis, and they forget that there is a tangibility to what we do. Print is also the clever end. Yeah, data is incredibly clever, but when you think what some printers are being asked to produce, I mean, they're not just beautiful, but they're mechanically, some things I've seen put together are way outside of a standard utility bill, transpromo transactional technology that would drive it. So I think, yeah, you're right. I think that there is a risk at the moment. Everybody thinks if you can put a picture on and change some text, that all of a sudden it's personalized, and it is. But I think it goes way beyond that. From a cloud printer point of view, if you deal with, say, programmatic mailing, the S&P have done a lot of strategic mailing partnership to promote this, and I think they're doing a great job in conjunction with the Royal Mail, etc. But this triggered marketing, programmatic marketing collateral has been around for a long time, with a lot of technologies, the XMPIs of the world and the CFAs and various technologies like that have been doing this for a while. But I think that we're in a situation now where we just need to acknowledge that print is part of the bigger mix. I mean, with the programmatic mail side in conjunction with ourselves, even though there's nothing been announced, imagine that Cloudprinter, who ultimately are a global delivery network for print across 105 countries, imagine someone wanting to produce a mailing piece of a few 100,000 items of mailing that normally would be produced in the UK or in another country centric to wherever the job's being created. It will be printed, it will go through a mailing system, and it will be sent out and dispatched based upon the mailing of that local country. With Cloudprinter, you could be in a situation in the future where a product would be uploaded, it will be analyzed. The algorithm that sits deep within the heart of the Cloudprinter platform would effectively determine that there's, 17 locations that this mailing needs to go. It will then take 100,000, 50,000, 300,000 of each of these mailings and drop them into sites locally within the country of the final destination, thus reducing carbon footprint, thus reducing time to end user, cost of mailing, etc., etc. So all of a sudden, that personalization goes one step further. But ultimately, it all starts with data. And I think that the thing that, for me, that would be the trinity of an individual now who wants to have value across the markets would be someone who's got a marketing degree, someone who's a data scientist, and someone who is probably a psychologist. You put those three things together, and you've got someone that can pull together a very, very targeted and relevant campaign for whatever demographic you're dealing with. But these three elements often come together, possibly in different individuals with different agendas and different approaches, but very rarely do they all exist in one company. So you often find that some of the true capabilities of personalization aren't met because the minds aren't aligning.
You're listening to the Up Close and Personal podcast with me, Richard Askam, and my guest today, Tim Cox. Tim, you mentioned something there that I think one of the goals of this show, this new personalization experience show from FESPA, is trying to address is the areas that are needed to be included in the thought process for product development, sales development, marketing development, go beyond print capability. And I think certainly in my travels over the last few years, I've been hugely impressed and in fact blown away by the capability that the print industry has developed. But what it hasn't developed is a 360-degree view of it. And one of the goals for this show is to have all of those 360-degree views inside the room, inside the tent. You mentioned their marketing. You also mentioned data. You also mentioned psychology, which I think is massive, part of this. And in fact, one of my guests upcoming on podcast will be the data scientist Colin Strong from Ipsos, and we're going to be discussing that very point. But I wonder whether the industry now almost has to stop developing capability for a while. And just move to the left or move to the right and explain it to those that would love to participate but have no idea that it even exists. Are we missing a trick?
I think you're right. I find, if I put a salesman's hat on, I've found that whether I'm selling technology like web to print or involved in integrations for workflow or working within, say, the world of MIS or the Cloudprinter type technology, I think that a lot of the time, 2/3 of any engagement, any sale is often education. You're often explaining to someone either how to correct their thinking on what it is that they're looking at, or actually you're just trying to give them at least some foundations from which to build some plans. So I think absolutely education is the most important factor. And this is one of the reasons why I said I think that the print industry, we're not talking about something that's unobtainable in terms of information. It's out there, and it's out there in just the most ridiculously diverse mechanisms, from a podcast right the way through to written documentation. Most of the organizations that oversee marketing will take you on a 2 or 3 weekend digital marketing course, or they'll deal with these, whether it's the Chartered Institute of Marketing, the DMA, whoever it is. All of these organizations will manage an educational process. But I mean, that was a long answer to a very simple question. The answer to me is yes, absolutely.
That's good. That's good. It was a good answer. And it's interesting, Tim, because I read post-COVID, an awful lot is now known about human behavior than it was previously. And one of the most interesting facts for me was it apparently takes 90 days of a different behavior in order for it to become cemented in your being, in your consciousness, which is why dieting is so hard, exercise goals are so hard, because 90 days is a long time. And of course with COVID, that worldwide experiment of turning it off and turning it on again, lasted an awful lot longer than 90 days. And as a result, a lot of people, me included, have adopted habits that we developed during those lockdown periods. So I wonder whether, and I kind of like the word education, but I don't in equal measures because some people feel patronized by it. I wonder whether what we need to launch here from the print industry side of personalization is a massive awareness campaign of what's possible. Yep. Because when and I go back to COVID, when we were all very compliant, largely very compliant. We understood the problem, we adopted the behavior. So awareness and adoption. How do we take awareness and adoption into personalization? I know that sounds trite compared to COVID, so forgive me for the comparison. But in terms of getting people to behave differently, they have to understand what's needed in order to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do. But I think it comes back to a lot of other fundamentals that I think that the print industry suffer from. And I think that we've not been great, as I say, I'm part of the print industry. I don't think we've been particularly good at sexing up print. I don't think that we've been particularly good at balancing the gender issues. It's not even an issue, but I think that it's a mainly male-orientated industry. It certainly was up until maybe a decade or so ago. It also doesn't really attract a lot of young people. But if you look at what those organizations that are supporting it, whether it's the printing charity with Print Futures Awards, or Shine, any of these organizations that are trying, and I'm talking generic UK, I know this is an international audience, but I'm sure every country has it, but it's bringing people in with a different mindset, with a different set of aspirations. No longer do you go on a 4-year apprenticeship in the print industry in the way that you used to when you were going to become a compositor or a plate maker or whatever it might be. This is just gone, and I think that we owe it to ourselves to give people that environment, make it exciting. And I think as business owners, if you take the average ages that are spoken about, the average owner of a print business is 40s to 50s. Now, even, with all the will in the world, I like to think that I'm quite connected to what's going on in the world, but I know that my daughters communicate in a completely different way, and they access different channels, and that they purchase, everything is done differently. So I think that there just needs to be an acknowledgement that it's probably time to allow some of the younger team members to shine, and remember that, in order to make people aware of things that are changing, you've got to be aware of it yourself. And I just think that there's too many people that are taking a bit of a flat earth approach to selling and introducing what they do as printers to the people that are placing the work. So I don't really know where it can go. I just think there is a wind of change. A lot of the organizations out there are now starting to create events online, and offline, that I think were bred out of the COVID lockdown, that are now allowing them to facilitate to their audience a much different type of I'm back on education again, awareness. To coin your phrase.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's interesting, and I've got a guest coming up on a future podcast who is a millennial futurist, and what will these kids, what will your kids, what will my kids want going forward? Ultimately, they're the consumers of the future, so we should really understand that for sure. But I wonder whether the print industry right now, and I take your point about male, pale and stale, here we are, are they, in a way, have they created new capabilities but still using old thinking?
I think so. And I think it's probably down to decision makers within the organizations. I mean, you don't know what you don't know. So if you're a salesperson, a business owner, and you're engaging a client who maybe you've had for quite a long time, you're only really going to be able to talk about the capabilities that you have and the knowledge that you've been exposed to. So it's going to be very, very difficult for you to talk outside of these things conceptually with maybe a marketer who's desperate to understand more about what you can do. And I think, we saw this when VR came in, augmented reality came in, and I think that if you look at print as part of that marketing mix again, you've got augmented reality campaigns that involve the journey perhaps starting with a piece of print that is interacted with a mobile, that takes you to a site, that drags information from you, that's triggering a response that might send you tickets or an invite or whatever, or maybe a piece of merchandise, and that then drags you on that journey further. Now, they couldn't give a toss whether you're going to have a printed T-shirt or a voucher. They want to understand more about you, because people are still filling in the gaps on that demographic. And I think that you look at how supermarkets are using facial recognition to trigger responses on an aisle basis to the shopper in the aisle, based upon what the visualization software has identified. And it's very much the same with print. So I think that for a printer to understand how data can be utilized, I mean, watch the Netflix documentary on Cambridge Analytica. I mean, that will give you a sensationalist view of what data can do. But if we drag that back down to the real world, ultimately, a printer has to visualize something physical that fits within that campaign. And I think printers, people in the print industry, manufacturers as well, we're all guilty here, need to be in a situation where we can truly understand what is possible. These technologies that are being produced, incredible inkjet technologies, incredible wide format, incredible online web to print technologies, and etc. All of this, I think, is being used sometimes in a very two-dimensional way, when really a more three-dimensional approach should be taken to it, even if naively a printer or someone in the print industry goes and talks to the marketer and says, look, this is what we can do. We know this technology can do a lot more. We need you to understand what we can produce, but we need your minds to drive the innovation that we know that we can achieve as a business and with this technology, but we don't have the imagination to do it.
Well, that's the key word, isn't it, Tim? Is imagination, and we're running out of time, and I could talk to you today, but I just want to put this final point to you, really. You said you were the son of a father, as was I. My father was in the wine industry. Your father was in the print industry, and I think in a way we were beneficiaries of a great education. I'll use the word. But what it was an education of how it's always been done, not necessarily how it needs to be done. And I wonder, here's my challenge to anybody listening today that has got children that they want to come into their world. Let them educate you what that world looks like, rather than the other way around. Because you said it earlier on. Your kids are working in a way now that's beyond comprehension. My daughter is the same. So I wonder whether the challenge now is not to bring our children in and teach them the way that it's always been, but the other way around.
It can be, but I think that the trouble is there's almost a marriage needs to happen here between the creatives that are taking briefs from the brand or going to the brand with a brief or an idea. They can only build and execute what they know is possible. So sometimes it's a synergy between the printer and the owner of the campaign, let's say, for instance, whether that's an agency, an in-house marketing department, whether it's the owner of an organization, it doesn't matter. Sometimes these organizations will often play plagiarism. They'll have seen a great idea and they'll want to apply it themselves. So they don't know how to do it, but they know it can be done. So they come to the printer because printers are notorious of, they've been the Mr. Fix-Its. It's always here's what we want to do. We don't care how you do it. Oh, by the way, make it cheap. And the printer's got to work out how on earth they can take this double-sided printed sheet and turn it into something incredible. So I think that I still think there's a synergy, and I think it's communication and awareness, education, call it what you will. But I think if you bring a printer that can communicate well together with a campaign owner or a marketer and just say, this is what we can do. This is where the future's coming. We can print incredible things. We can use different layering techniques. We can use different embellishments. We can put different triggers into the print, all of this kind of thing. How would that benefit you? What are you trying to do? Let us put our mind into what you're doing. But I think so often that the creatives, I'll put them into a bracket because it's a big bracket, so often come to the printers with just an idea that they want to be executed. They won't have often thought that in order to print it, that the grain of the paper is going to be cracking. And had they thought about knocking it 3 mil the other way around, it would have been a perfectly executed job. Or they will deal with enormous wastage, which means the job's much more expensive. And had they thought again about how they were using it, or talk to the printer and say, look, this is what we wanted you to do. How would you best execute that physically? And I think that there needs to be a bridging of the chasm. People need to be able to speak more, and they need to see it more on a collaborative basis. But I think that printers have often either not been great at communicating the amazing secrets about what they could produce. And I think marketers have always been very, very wrapped up in that side of things and not realizing or appreciating that there is an absolutely vast mine of information that they can pull on to become innovative, save money, save the planet, whatever you want to do. There's lots of reasons why they would engage the person that's putting marks on the paper. But that collaboration sadly doesn't happen that often.
No, it doesn't.
It's often a brief is given, price is given, job is done.
Yeah, exactly. And Tim, you've beautifully sort of captured really the goal of this show, is to bring all of those disparate voices with their disparate needs together at one event over 4 days to have a long conversation. It won't be, it's not going to be presentation heavy, this event. It's going to be conversation heavy. And get all of those parties, the agencies, the creatives, the producers, the manufacturers, the brands, the retailers, the consumers, the data, everybody in that room. So everybody can have that, oh, I had no idea moment. If
Yeah.
if you could give one final piece of advice to anybody attending that show, what would that be?
Don't drink too much.
That is the perfect piece of advice.
I think really, what I think would be really sensible would be if you could create some kind of think tank or an event where an education or an awareness of the kind of conversations that need to take place is understood by both parties. Because I think that people don't really, so many people in print go and buy a piece of product. There's no real plan around it. And then they try and work out, based upon what they've seen of the product, how they can sell it. So I think visit the show with an open mind, ask lots of questions, and realize that you don't have all the answers, but the people at the show collaboratively do.
Absolutely. And Tim, I'm hoping you're going to be with us at the show to continue this conversation in person. But for now, thank you for being a wonderful guest. Tim Cox, thank you very much.
No worries. Good to speak to you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.